You're listening to A Creative Excuse, presented by Hecho a Mano. I'm Frank Rose.
And I'm Carrie Duvall. This episode is with Juana Estrada Hernández, whose show is on view at Hecho through March 29th.
Next up at Hecho a Mano are solo shows with Haley Greenfeather English and Kate Wood, opening Friday, April 3rd from 5 to 7 p.m. Then the next day, on Saturday, we'll have artist talks with Haley and Kate and free coffee and donuts from noon to 1:30.
We'd love it if you would subscribe to the podcast on your favorite listening platform and leave a review if you like what you hear. Thanks for listening.
How are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Yeah. Just moving along.
Yeah.
Staying busy. I feel like you guys are always just running around. Didn't you just go to California and back, or was that?
Well, that was just
I
Frank.
did, yeah.
I didn't go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I went and looked at some art fairs. It was it's a trip. I liked LA. I mean, I only saw like a very little bit of it, but yeah, Freeze is a beast. It's not for us at all. It's such a giant cavernous crowded space, and it's hard to actually see anything. And there was a fair called Felix, which I really liked, which is in a hotel, and each gallery has their own hotel room. And it just was really felt human, and you could actually look at the work and talk to the dealers, and sometimes the artists were there, and it just is way more focused. It was a nicer just environment. Like the Freeze and like the fairs that go in those giant convention centers they're just not great environments to look at art, So it was a good trip though.
Frank actually felt frozen there.
I felt frozen.
Whoa.
What do you mean?
I'm making a pun.
Freeze. Yes. Right.
What about you?
Oh,
Been
there.
running around? Has all the snow melted?
Yes, I came back. There was no more snow, and I thought, thank God. But what was left was potholes, and this is something very common in New York, but out here, I just never realized how severe they really get, and it's actually become a state of emergency for Rhode Island. Wow. And actually the first week that I got back, I was just coming home from work, nothing irregular about it, and I hit a pothole, and now my steering wheel is straight up 45 degrees to the right. So now I'm just well, I hope my insurance covers it, or this is gonna, or I sell a lot of art, and I hope I can fix this, because this is not great. But it's been good. I'm in spring break now, so thank you for just working with me. When I came back from Santa Fe, it was just a lot of running, getting students through midterms, and of course, because I don't know why we do it this way, the same week that we have midterm exams and critiques and such, all the administration wants to pack all the meetings in there too, and which I understand. Everybody should go on break, but so it's been a lot of running and just kind of dealing with that, and but it's been pothole city over here. I think it's getting better, but I've really tried not to drive around much, because after that I was well, I'm only going to make it worse. And so now I have to figure out, now that I have time this week, I have to go take it into the mechanic and get that sorted. But it was crazy. I was kind of just driving, and I thought, no big deal. And I was passing by the hospital. I was past this hospital, and I don't know, I swear to you, I mean, I know that my car is small, but when I hit that pothole, my head hit the roof of my car. That's how hard it was. And so I thought, oh my God, I just hit something. So I kind of swerved over, and I thought, okay, everything seems okay. My tire didn't pop, but then I just kind of made it home, and then I got in the car the next morning, and I was backing out, and I was why am I backing out straight and my wheel's like this? This is really weird. So it kind of hit me then, but
Oh man.
Hopefully it's not too crazy, and it's just, I don't know. Hopefully they can just go,
Yeah, just straighten it out.
Yeah.
Straighten it out.
Yeah.
So,
Potholes are kind of mysterious to me, honestly. how they just show up one day. It's just, there was a road and then suddenly there's a hole in the road. And I'm like, that I feel a little embarrassed to say this, but I don't even understand the science behind why is it snows and then there are potholes. Why does that happen?
Probably has something to do with like temperature changes and moisture and materials moving and
it's just the thawing. It's the thawing in combination with thawing of the snow with the water in combination with the salt makes it a corrosive, which then breaks down basically the patches that they fill into the asphalt. Like how like they just patch it with asphalt and then gravel. It's interesting. Like I totally researched this because I was like, what the hell? But also some of the materials that are used, like asphalt, in a mix of like oil and something else, like we kind of they're loosely used in litho. So then I'm like, oh, okay, I see. But anyways, it doesn't make it any, less scary. And even just walking my dog around the city, it's like, there's this video that's went viral where there's one giant boulevard where they have counted at least 50 potholes within like a 1.5 mile stretch.
Wow.
And some of them are tiny. Could you call them a pothole? Well, yeah, anything that's like not flat is a pothole. But then there's some where it's like, it feels like they almost have gone like a half a foot or a foot deep. And it's scary.
Yeah. Like, I know, I appreciate you just sharing with me the very scientific reasoning behind potholes, but my imagination goes, it's like the earth is opening up and slowly, it's just like, it's like, it's asking us to go down into the underworld. That's what potholes are.
Yes.
They're like little portals.
100%. Maybe I should think about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to reflect on that.
Well,
Thank you.
You said some of the chemistry involved is, like litho. Maybe there's like, you can use like asphalt and salt and stuff and like make prints using road construction materials.
Literally. Yeah, I'm actually going to think about that. Maybe I'll do that in a demo or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
That's funny.
Take your students out like on a pothole field trip. And then you could talk. Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I wanted to maybe just sort of start with talking about sort of your backstory and like how you came to being an artist and just like where you grew up and when you immigrated and all those kinds of stories and just kind of like how it brought you to where you are now. So you were born in Zacatecas?
Yeah.
And so how long were you there?
So I was born in Buena Vista, Zacatecas, but I grew up in a town both between Buena Vista and Los Griegos and Luis Moya. And so it's like a triangular kind of town sort of situation where everything's so close, like about half a mile to each other. And so I grew up there with my 3 other sisters until I was 7 years old. And my family then decided to immigrate to the United States.
Are you the youngest?
I am the third in my family. So I have 2 older sisters, myself, and then I have 1 younger sister.
Okay, you're in the middle.
I'm in the middle. I consider myself the middle child, which I think in some ways sort of created, I'm kind of like the outlier in terms of, also not only like the career that I chose, but just, I don't know, maybe my personality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, each placement has a very specific role. The middle child, I think it can be challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you all settled in Denver, is that right?
Yeah. So we immigrated to Denver in 2001.
Uh-huh.
And we've kind of lived there ever since. And the transition was, I think for me, because of the age that I was in, it definitely was a lot easier than my oldest siblings. My oldest sister, when we immigrated, she must have been about 12 to 13 years old. So, kind of jumping into middle school. My second sister sort of followed her right after. And then, of course, myself and my younger sister, we started in elementary school. So in terms of that sort of, that shock, that natural shock of just having to not only move from one place to another, but also then having to come to terms with, like, what does a cultural shift look like, not only in society, but even just in the normal, like in school, like what does it mean to have new teachers and new friends, and also having to adapt and shift to a new language as well, where you sort of, so there was just a lot, right? Like there was an overflux of not only expectations from the educational side of things, but also home. So my parents really believed that, the United States would really prove to be a place that could give us the more opportunities that we had in our rural towns. Not to say that there isn't a livelihood there, but I think that they really aspired something for us that at the time, we were really confused and upset about it. But looking back at it now, I am very sort of thankful that they chose to do that for us.
Yeah, parents, I mean, God bless them. I mean, like the sacrifices that they make when your kids are fighting tooth and nail against, certain decisions that like, we just can't see at the time, and like why, they make the choices that they do. I moved when I was 7 also from Anchorage to Seattle, not a different country move, but that, and then I moved from when I was 15 from Seattle to Houston, and the one when I was younger was easier. Like you said, when you're 7, there's a little bit of an advantage there, kind of being like, I don't know, this is just normal, we're moving. And then, but when I was 15 and a teenager, that was pretty hard, and I I didn't approve.
Yeah. There's a lot of internal changes that are happening at that age, and then compounding it with external changes. It's a lot.
Yeah.
7, we're like way more Gumby. Like we're just like flexible, super flexible.
No, certainly. Yeah, very flexible. And, but I would say that all of us sort of experience different challenges, social, educational, and then also how we sort of situate our own ideas of what it means to be in this new country, and like what we aspire to be. Mm-hmm. So I think that for me, when I started elementary school, I often think a lot about the times where I had to step out into the hallway and practice my my vocabulary, my English vocabulary. And when I talk about my work and how I sort of naturally chose this path as an artist, I think art was always there, but I just didn't really recognize until much later on in life how it's always been there for me. And I think one of the most common, like one of the most clear memories of that time was that when I was in elementary school, you have your English language development program, and so they match you with like a teacher who will sort of independently try to teach you how to speak English. But I remember at that time where and I think it's still being used today, but you have like a flashcard, and on one side it has the vocab word, and then on the other side it has an image sort of describing describing that word. And I just remember sitting there in the hallway thinking to myself, like she would put up the flashcard and I would look at the image, and then I was supposed to like, do this dance of like saying describe that image. And at first it was like, what is this called? And then it sort of naturally progressed into describing like a scene, right? So, and it was hard. It's like, first of all, I thought it was really confusing. I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, there's this natural or this perceived assumption that I know what to do, or I should know what to do. But then later, I quickly realized that it could become a strategy for learning how to communicate. It was like, of course, like that was a teaching tool that was being prescribed to me or had to help me. But then I thought, okay, well, if I'm sitting in the classroom and I need to go use the bathroom, and there isn't a classmate that can help me translate that, then how do I ask for what I need? And so I quickly sort of recognized the power of visual language in communicating ideas and what you need, and sort of using drawing or art to create connections with people. But of course, back then it was very much like, okay, I just need to go to the bathroom, or I need this very practical, functional thing in this space. But of course, like later on, when I really started to think about what a life as an artist could be, I think about those times and how powerful art can be, when I was able to use symbols and colors in ways that I couldn't describe or put to words.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when you have that experience of like, you know, you're already learning another language in a way when you're looking at images and symbols as something that can communicate a meaning, right? And that's essentially what visual art is, you know. And I think for certain people that have that, like, that's an unlock, you know. It's like this experience. It's like, oh, like these images, these symbols are like words too, and they can communicate meanings, and maybe they can communicate a lot more than a word. I know for me that was an unlock. You know, it was a way of like, oh wow, this is a way to like access feelings, or to like access, you know, bigger constructions of thought of how I, you know, how something is, or how I feel about something, or my ideas. Um, that's really cool that, you know, you had that sort of like put that together. That's really neat.
Yeah, and you know, I just remember that first year was like, okay, like I can see this game. All right, so if I can sort of adapt that strategy, that very simple teaching tool to my everyday life in the classroom at that age, like I could do this, and I had a lot of fun with it. And even though I recognize at the same time that duality of frustration, where it's like it's like I understand what you're like looking. I'm sorry, I understand what you're sharing with me in the visuals. I just can't say it, whether it's pronunciation or understand the complexity of, you know, sort of that literal translation. And I think over time, of course, I realized that there's not a lot of words that all, you know, they're nuanced in terms of what they mean also. And so for me, I took a long time sort of, it took a long time for me to really feel confident in not only feeling like I could speak English fluently, right? And then also sort of, and also just being confident in speaking it with other people. So I always struggled for a long time, and but I think that for me, that's why I really loved reading growing up. It sort of transported me to other worlds. It also definitely helped me with my vocab, but also I just there was so there was, even though I had that aha moment, you know, learning a new language is hard even at a young age, and I can't even think about how challenging it must have been for my elder siblings too. And you know, that's why I have a lot of respect for them, because that, you know, they also were like sort of navigating their own sort of difficulties throughout school, and so in many ways, like also too, I'm thankful that we had each other to also navigate all those nuances, because if I had to do it alone, and, you know, be able to come home and not share why I was so frustrated that day, like why couldn't I say like the tap, you know, like a faucet. I remember that's like the one word, or that one picture was like, I don't understand, like it's like la llave, but what, like I couldn't, that's the one word that I couldn't remember. And I think that the teacher did me dirty, because she was like, no, you have to describe like the handle of the tap. And I'm like, why? It's like the whole thing is called the tap, or a faucet. Anyway, so like the niche, the minutia of it all was really frustrating. But anyway, so that's all to say is that, yeah, I think that connection between drawing, language, understanding, and sharing just these complex ideas and emotions through all that was was there from the beginning. I just didn't really understand it until much later in life.
I think that's, yes, with the visual, there's an immediate recognition, and it doesn't matter. Well, in some ways it matters, there's certain things in certain cultures that, visually they're not going to have reference for, but it's like sky, bathroom, all, it's like we have that immediate recognition, and then it just gets more and more complex. And I'm thinking too of the 7-year-old who is still in some ways learning language as opposed to any language, as opposed to, the 15-year-old who's already had language pretty like, not embedded, but like concretized in them. And then to learn a new language on top of that is, it's a different place. And I feel you when you're like coming home and you can share with your sisters, like, this was hard. And then your sister's like, yeah, this is hard. I don't understand. And to feel the ease of that, to come home. Mm-hmm. I'm also curious, has the word faucet, because that was so hard to learn, has that taken on like a meaning for you?
Well, I will say that it became really helpful later on. When we were growing up in Denver, we often, since, we're 4 women, my father's a landscaper. And for a while he was working for a company and decided to sort of leave his company and start his own sort of, his own business. And, he didn't have a lot of money. And he said, well, I have four girls that can help me work. And so we were kind of like, okay. And I remember during that time how we were sort of perceived as these like weird sort of outlier kind of families. And I think for a long time, my dad was perceived as this guy who was like, how dare is he like taking his girls out to, cut grass and trim trees and like go out and help on landscape. And during those times, I think a lot about how, well, first back then as a teenager, I'm like, I don't want to do this after school. I find this to be, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, it's hard on the body. And also like, I don't want to go work after high school, when I'm done after high school, like, that's just not the sort of life that I want. But, when I think a lot about that time, all of those things might be true, but my dad often, asked us, he would have one of us translate, one of us would like start helping, like take the tools off the truck. The third would also just kind of be on standby to help whoever. And I just remember we would always switch roles. And during that time, he was also like, okay, so I'm going to teach you guys all how to drive. And I was like, okay. And I remember, he taught us how to drive in like the Suburban. Instead of like, why wouldn't we use like the little car that we have? And he's like, no, it's good for you to like learn how to use, drive these big, long vehicles. And so he was always like teaching us all these skills. And one of the biggest things that I remember is that he was like, okay, Juana, if you're shy or if you don't have confidence, then we cannot eat. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, that's so dramatic. What, like, and he was like, you know what? You have to sort of allow yourself to shake off whatever it is that you're holding, that's holding you back, and go up to that front door, knock on the door, talk to this nice lady, and just say, we're here to mow your lawn. We're here to talk about a certain quote or a certain job that you want us to do. And, it was really hard. And a lot of that was the fact that, we were like 15 and 16. And at that age, you're just awkward. You don't want to talk to like, I think I've always been very introverted in that way. But he always just said, you know what, you're practicing. They don't know you. You can be whoever you want and just go out there and just talk to this person. And so when we would do that, he often would like stand by the truck, and then he would just watch us go up the porch, knock on the door, and have this conversation. And then, they would come out and talk to my dad. And it felt like a performance for a long time. But I think what was happening there was he was like, I have to foster their confidence somehow. And even though this feels like a very, I know it makes them uncomfortable, but over time I recognized that a lot of the times it was because I didn't feel like not that my voice mattered, but I just felt awkward talking to to random strangers. And then also I didn't have the vocabulary to also say, hey, we're here to give you a landscape quote on your irrigation system. I think that, what's wrong with your irrigation system is that one of your water taps is broken and the actual handle is not flushed right. And so, even though my English language development teacher, she got me when I was 7 years old, later on in life, I was like, oh, I'm never going to forget that word. No, but so that all these sort of nuances between, not only how do you embrace language, how do you foster confidence, and how do you foster this sense of pride in sort of working with your hands and recognizing what it means to just hold on a job, even though your dad is making you go cut lawn in the middle of the week and you're just like, why am I doing this? I have a lot of respect for him now, looking back now, and I feel a lot of sense of pride that these jobs that nobody wants to do, but we do them with pride, we want to do them well, helped us, it sort of helped me at least in these sort of different areas, but also it allowed me to think a lot about what labor looks like in different families, being a landscaper, working in concrete, being a stay-at-home mom, being a baker, these are everyday lives and everyday jobs that people do in our communities. And and now I'm rambling, but all that's to say is that, yes, I think that that all those connections, it's interesting that when you really sit down and think about it, there's always been these threads in my life that when I really slow down and think about, these tensions that maybe I didn't understand at the time, they kind of come back full circle.
So when you were in high school, were you drawing a lot at that time? When did you kind of first notice a real attraction to drawing or making things?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, I was an anomaly in that I was in drawing classes, a lot of drawing classes. I was a sports kid. I was playing basketball, tennis, and I was in this sort of class, this program called, I can't remember the name, but it was a program that was designed to get kids ready to pursue a career in healthcare, whatever that meant. And so for me at the time, I was really interested in science, I was really outdoorsy. I was landscaping with my dad. I was doing all kinds of interesting things. But I always knew that I really enjoyed drawing, and whether I thought of it as a serious thing or not, it was always there. And I think that, sort of the progression that I had was, I was really fascinated with making one-to-one copies of animes and markers, playing with fonts and type, kind of very inspired by the graffiti culture that I was seeing around in my community. And then also just seeing if I could, create a really good shaded copy of the latest telenovela actress that was, sort of on TV. And so I was just really sort of fascinated by, sort of replicating those things in what do you call it, in printer paper. Mm-hmm. And so I was just kind of I'll just draw on whatever I have. And so when I was in high school, I had the chance to start taking art classes, and they kind of naturally sort of progressed. And I think that when it really hit that level of importance was really around junior and senior year, where in Aurora Central High School, there was my high school teacher, Cheryl Wassinger. And at the time, she was like, you should take advanced drawing. I think it'd be really good for you. And then it sort of progressed that I think I got this right. In junior year, senior year, you could take AP drawing. Mm-hmm. And so if you were to pass that and then send your portfolio to see if you got a good grade in the exam, right, then you would get high school credit. College credit. And, Miss Wassinger was awesome. I mean, she was kind of one of those teachers where she was like, okay, let's try all the things. Let's try markers, let's try Prismacolors, let's try charcoal, let's try all these things. And I thought, wow, I literally was just, I was used to operating with a Crayola set of 9 colors and 10 colors, and half of the markers were dried out, and I just kind of used whatever I had handy. And so Ms. Wassinger I remember one class in junior year where she asked us, okay, so now that we're done with all these prompts of creating still lifes and thinking about line and things that are really sort of, foundational in 2D design and drawing, like how do we move past that and create work that is more conceptual, that talks about ideas that you're really interested in? And I thought, okay, what does that really mean? And I remember she said something along the lines of like, I just want you guys to make things that really matter to you, the things that really are affecting your lives right now. And so back in high school, I was like, I don't know what that could mean. But throughout that year, in junior and senior year, I had classmates where, we were making work about, that even back then, like about deportation, about mental health, about about families, about sort of individual tensions that were happening in our families and in our community. And I, especially in my senior year class, there was something about being in that environment that really sort of like solidified that this is something that I have to do, not like for my soul, but I can't see anything like beyond this. And so at the same time, I was still in that program of possibly like pursuing like a career in health and in the medical field. And I thought, well, maybe I could do like medical illustration. Maybe I could do something, maybe I could do something with science because I loved it. But if I really think about it now, it's like, oh no, I was trying to find a way to give my love and my thoughts of being an artist and like weigh it with something that could be perceived as serious. Like, why couldn't I even back then, I was like, how can I like really negotiate this and sell it to my family and give it value beyond the value that I felt like I already recognized even during that time. And so I was kind of like thinking about those possibilities and I just thought, I don't know if this is going to work out for me. But then also at the same time, like I was just trying to find pathways to pursuing a college education because at the time, so I was in high school in 2012, and that's around the time that Barack Obama passed a deferred action for childhood arrivals. And so I had a lot of questions about like what does it mean to actually be able to go to to a collegiate sort of to go to college, while also recognizing that I didn't have the tools or the pathway to do so because I was undocumented at the time. And I didn't really recognize how that was really going to change my life. And when the DACA program was sort of established and, Barack Obama came out and like the Rose Garden said, hey, I have this program that is going to really help this certain demographic of people. And I sort of saw it as like a lifeline. I said, okay, like if I can do this program, then maybe there's still a shot for me to go to college. Because like, again, like even though I was still weighing the fact that like, how can I, maybe if I do pursue like medical illustration or something like that, something that is sort of embedded with science, like how am I still going to pay for that? Or how am I going to like pursue an education that way? Because even back then, there were still laws that were in place, I believe in Colorado and in other states, that if you were undocumented, you had to pay out-of-state tuition. Like there was policies set in place that financially were making it very difficult. And of course, even now, back then and now, like people with the status couldn't afford. We can't like qualify for federally funded programming like FAFSA. And I think that's like a misperception and misinformation that's out there about DACA students. But so the question is like, how do I make people take me seriously about being an artist? How do I pay for this thing? And how do I actually like, and like, how do I do this? And I just remember that when the DACA program came out, I was like, okay, like I'm going to make this work. And so in high school, because of like my classes that I was taking, my AP classes that I was taking, with drawing specifically, it gave me enough credits. Aurora Central High School, I feel like in Colorado always had a bad reputation about it. It was underfunded. We had a low graduation rate. We were just perceived as like, like we were in the ghetto and it wasn't a good school. But they actually had a lot of tools that if you took advantage of them, could actually help you get to the next stage to pursue a college degree. And so they had this program called Ascent, which I think back then it's like if you had a certain GPA, if you got like a 22 or something in the ACT, and if you got I think it was like 13 credit hours, which you could do while you were in high school, then they would pay for 2 years of community college for free. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, if I can get that, that is my first step in the door. And plus with DACA, like I can get a restaurant job and I can make this happen for me. And I did. And so when I graduated high school, I had 15 credit hours in college credits, and then I just went to community college for another year and a half, and they paid it for free, and it was like amazing. Like I would go in and grab my books, and they would say, "Okay, $0." I'm like, great. And so I really just always tried to make opportunities happen for me. But also, I think a lot of the time too, it was timing, right? Like 2000. What are the chances that the DACA program came out in 2012, right when I needed it? And so, and funny enough is that Miss Cheryl Wassinger, she's retired. She's making her own work. She's making her own paintings. And I recently reached out to her just to tell her what happened with my life. That I graduated high school. I went to community college. I went to Fort Hays State University for undergrad with the help of Hector Villanueva, who was also an advisor that helped me get there with funding, working with me, knowing that I was a DACA-mented student. I went to college at the University of New Mexico. So I just basically told her my whole trajectory. And then and now that I'm working at RISD teaching printmaking, and then she said, "Did you know that I got my MFA in painting at RISD?" And I thought, no. And you know what? I remember some high school teachers would say, Miss Wassinger's way too qualified to be teaching high school here. And why isn't she somewhere else? And at the time I was like, she's awesome. Why are you talking about Miss Wassinger? Why do you want her to leave? And now I'm like, oh wow, so you had an MFA from RISD, you had a pretty active art practice, and out of all the places that you chose to teach, you decided to teach at Aurora Central High School that is really underfunded, and I'm pretty sure you paid for all the supplies, all the art supplies, for us to have the good stuff, not the off-brand stuff, the good stuff, and you chose to be here because there's something about us that really drove you. And I have a lot of respect for her. And of course, she changed my life. She really made me take art seriously and really think about the value of what that means for you as an individual, but also how the work leaves and enters society. And I'm just really happy that she was she's still in my life.
That's so cool.
It sounds like you've had some amazing guardians throughout your life. People who
100%.
Yeah, really cared and nurtured you. Yeah.
Yeah. You I've heard you talk before about Hector. Can you share a little bit about your experience kind of going to Fort Hays and meeting Hector and kind of his impact? Now, backing up slightly, you weren't on an art track when you started there, is that right?
Yeah. So So when I finished community college, I actually got an Associate of Arts in community college.
Oh, okay.
And so I did. That was my first testament to myself, saying I want an art degree. And when I decided to go to Fort Hays, I had met there was a student in my high school. So the reason I found Fort Hays State University in Western Kansas, in Hays, Kansas, is that I knew somebody who went to the same high school that went to Aurora Central High School, and that he was in Fort Hays State. And we were in the same position in terms of our immigration statuses. And I thought, wait, he's at this university in Kansas, it seems like he got a lot of funding. Like, how did he do it? Like, this is amazing. Maybe there's a pathway there. And so I applied to Fort Hays State University. I reached out, and I got in contact with Hector, and I spoke to him. I said, hey, like, I want to go to school, and I filled out a questionnaire, and I think I put like science, like that I was going to pursue a degree in physics, like, or something, and I could do it. Like I had the knack for it, and I was like, I could do this. And again, because I was like, oh, if I could actually make this happen for me, I need to be able to get a degree in something that, again, like, and maybe in some ways, like, give it value, give my art practice value, or just make sure that I can really like have a life financially stable after this. I don't know. Like, I was still thinking that my parents were gonna like not understand, and I just want to preface that my parents never told me what I wanted, like what I had to do.
I was curious about that.
Anything. Never. But it was an internalized thing, because I thought, this is my one shot, and I can't ruin this for me. Mm-hmm. And so, and like, I feel like, see, that this is the society like talking to me. Anyway, so
I have to say though, that I can't tell you how common that is. Like, that's a cross-cultural thing, because so many of these conversations that when I talk to other artists about, like, when they started school, it's like, yeah, I started as a graphic design major. Mm-hmm. And after 6 months, I was like, I can't do graphic design. Yeah. And the reason they picked that was because they thought that they could get like a quote unquote real job.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been wondering that this whole time, like, where did this message come from that you had to pick something serious and that art wasn't serious?
Yeah, I think it was like what I was seeing in the world around me. So a lot of the people, a lot of the clients that we were meeting when we were landscaping with my dad, were teachers, they were engineers, they kind of had these certain backgrounds. And so I thought, oh, so if I do that, then I'll be able to help my family financially. Like, I can make sure that my dad retires early, or I could make sure that I can make enough money so that I can help my other sisters go to school. Like, I can sort of also provide in a way that feels helpful for everyone. And so I think it's like sort of internalizing, or sort of trying to understand these structures or these paths around me that look successful, but are not necessarily like the only way. Mm-hmm. And so when I met Hector, when I reached out and said, hey, like, how can you give me financial advice in terms of like how I can do this? He said, yeah, like, you should apply to the scholarship that we're offering. And it was a scholarship that was designed to, like, so if you got the scholarship, it was like a full ride. And Hector, he was like, yeah, it looks like this could be a good fit. And I told him that I wanted to pursue like a degree in physics, science. And he was like, okay, you have the grades, and you have the ACT scores, and you have the the associate's degree, and he thought, yeah, sure. But then and I got accepted to the school, so I thought, okay, great, I have all the money, I have the acceptance. All right, mom and dad, I am ready to go to Fort Hays. And they were like, no. What do you mean you're going to Fort Hays? Where's Fort Hays? And I said, it's in Hays, Kansas, Western Kansas. And they thought, no. They said no. And for them, it was, a lot of it had to do with the fact that we had never like lived apart. Their sort of concept about, it's not that they didn't value an education, is that was going to be too far. And we had grown up as a really tight unit. And the idea, which seems very natural in America, to just send your kids off to college, an excitement thing. Not that there wasn't excitement, but there was a lot of apprehension, right? Like, what does it mean for you to, only be only 4 hours apart from us, but to not understand, like, financially how all of that is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so I just emailed Hector and I said, oh my God, Hector, my parents said no. Can you please talk to them? I don't know what to do. And I'm, sort of panicking, because I thought, well, the biggest burden that you would think that my parents would have is financially. Then, like, what else can I tell them to convince them? And Hector came out to Colorado, to talk to them in person. And I remember I think it was like on a Friday or something, he drove down from with the university car, and he came and he got to my house early, and he said, okay, I am here. I have the pamphlets. I am going to answer any questions. He is also Latino. And so I think like, there was just like a lot of really good vibes. And he was like, where are your parents? And I said, my dad's not here. He's at work. And my mom's doing an errand. They're not here. And he was like, okay, I'll just come back. When do they come back? And I was like, in the evening? He was like, okay. So he left. And I don't know what he must have been doing in Colorado. And then he came back in the evening after we had dinner. And this was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 o'clock or something. And he said, okay, so, and he talked to him in Spanish and said, what are your concerns? What is the problem? And, they said, well, and so they had this conversation, and I just remember like sitting there with them, and he just talked to them like people. It's like, okay, yeah, you're sending your kid off to college, and besides the financials, like, let me just show you what the town is like. Let me show you like, let me reassure you that just because you're going to send Juana off to college, it doesn't mean that she's going to be by herself. Like, she's going to be with me. Of course, like, he's going to be a resource while I'm on the ground. And he was, like, he wasn't just there sort of, selling a product. Like, he was really there like, no, I'm a steward for other students of color. And I want to be there as a resource for her and for the other students that also came with me that year. And because he was there, he was given a pot of money to bring other students of color. And at Fort Hays State University, when I was there as a student, there was not a lot of us. And of course, I went back to teach at Fort Hays State University as my first teaching position later on in life. And of course, the demographics have gotten better. But back then, like, I also didn't recognize like that was going to be the case. I was just like, I just want to go to college. Like, I don't care. I don't care what the demographics looks like. I just know that this is the next step for me. And so my parents said, okay, well, this all sounds great. You painted a really good picture. And he's like, but the answer is still no. And he said, okay, so, well, what is there anything that I can provide, anything that I can say to convince you otherwise? He's like, well, we have another daughter. She has good grades. And if you can help her out, then you'll get 2 for 1. And he was like, okay, well, she needs to apply for the scholarship and also see if she's a good fit. And she had the grades, she had everything, and he took us both.
That's amazing.
And so not only did he change my life, but he also changed my sister's life. And
wow.
And so once we finally got there, I just remember that first semester, I started going to my science classes, and I thought, I can't do this. Like, I really can't do this. And before you do anything, you have to go talk to Hector, right? Because he's the one that's like helping you pay for the school. And he's like, okay, like, what's going on? And I went into his office and I said, this is what's going on. I can't pursue this career. I know that I told you that I was going to get a BFA, a bachelor's in physics. And I can't do this. Like, it's not that and he's like, oh, are the classes too hard? And I'm like, no, I can do this. Like, I'm a smart kid, but this is not what I'm passionate about. And he said, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to do a BFA with like a minor or with a certification in like K through 12 teaching. He was like, okay, that's going to take 5 years, not 4. And I only have 4 years money for you. And I said, okay. But he's like, okay, you know what? Show me your portfolio and show me that you're serious. And I said, okay. And I don't know what he thought, I have never asked him about that, but I came back with all my paintings, all my drawings. And he said, look, this is what I have. And he was like, oh, okay. Wow, you actually are serious about this. And he was like, okay, let me just help you switch. And sort of the rest is history. And when I switched, there was not a lot of classes left. We were 2 weeks in the first semester, and what was left was printmaking. And when I took that printmaking class, I Googled it the night before. What is this thing? I've never heard of this. And I just found a lot of references to like screen printing, apparel design, things like that. And I thought, great, we're going to be designing clothes. My professor, Gordon Sherman, he's an amazing etcher, amazing lithographer, painter, hated screen printing, never did screen printing until I got to UNM later on. But when I took that first printmaking class, I just realized, wow, this is something that offers drawing, painting. You can make multiples of stuff. It doesn't have to look one way. It's like a menu of all these things that I was really interested in. And also, it was really hard. And I'm a stubborn person, and if something doesn't look right, I just want to come back and try it again. And I always say too, like now as an educator, I tell students, I was like, listen, you have to be stubborn, you have to have grit. Like as an artist, not just a printmaker, but printmaking, like there's all kinds of ways that things can go south. But when things work just right, it's amazing. It's a wonder. Like when you pull that sheet of paper off of the matrix, it's incredible. So, but Hector was another pillar. So I had Miss Wassinger in high school. I have Hector in college. I have Gordon Sherman as my professor, and others along the way. And so I finished my career at Fort Hays and then decided to pursue an MFA at the University of New Mexico. And that's how I got to Albuquerque.
Yeah, and that's where we met.
Was that little, I'm so curious, the minor in K through 12, was that still the like, I need to have something in there that's serious?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. But I actually wanted to like, I during my time at Fort Hays, I was I had work study hours. So a lot of it just kind of started off like cleaning the studio, scrubbing the table, taking out not taking out the trash, but collecting all the trash. And then it sort of naturally progressed into something where it was like, my professor would say, hey, do you want me to show you how to like maintain this thing? And I'm like, okay, let's learn about equipment. Let's learn about all these little skill things that you kind of do every day and I don't see in the background. And then and then at the end, he was like, do you just want to be my assistant during my classes? And I was like, well, sure. Like, what does that mean? And he was like, well, oftentimes it's just helping me prep materials. If students have questions, you can just help them. And, it just is not something like super taxing, but I think you could be really good at this. And I thought, okay. And I remember how Gordon would ask, hey, like, do you want to do like a very small demo? Like I would never teach the class, but he would say, hey, do you want to just show them how to like ink up a plexi and just talk about like how you do this thing? And so I just kind of started doing this very early on, like sophomore year. And then in my junior year, that's really when I had to do my K through 12 like observational hours. And once I finally like started going to like the K through 12 classrooms, I thought, oh wow, like the environment is very different, and I don't think I can do K through 12. Like teenagers are hard. No, I just can't do it. And so I dropped the K through 12 certification path. However, that sort of seed of education was planted for me. And I just didn't really know what that would look like, whether it would look like a traditional like high school teacher, a professor, but I knew that teaching was something that was going to play it was always going to play a role in my life. I just didn't know how. And so when I finally transitioned into graduate school at the University of New Mexico, I had a lot of opportunities there to teach as to be a teaching assistant, but then also to not only in printmaking, but in the drawing department. And I was just kind of able to like bounce around in different areas and just practice teaching, develop my teaching style, and really just kind of understand like, whoa, like I actually like this. This is not just for collecting a check to help me pay for college. Like I actually really like this. And to do that for 3 years in grad school was really helpful. I mean, it was stressful because you're still a student, right? Along with the students that you're asked to teach. But it really cemented something really like early on in undergrad where I was like, okay, teaching is really something that I really like. I just wasn't really sure what that was going to look like after all my education was said and done, right? Even after the MFA program. And of course, like towards the end of my master's degree, I got an email that my undergrad professor was getting ready to retire and that maybe I should consider applying there. And I thought, I want to go back to Fort Hays. I don't know, like just to Western Kansas in general. But then also I wasn't really sure if I was qualified enough. Like I read the description of the job And I thought, I know I have these skills. I can teach these techniques, but I just don't know if I'm ready. And I decided that I was not going to apply. And then, like 2 or 3 days before the application was due, I said, what the hell? Like, I'm just going to start putting it together. And then I sent it in, and I ended up getting the job and went back to teach there, which was kind of an amazing, it was an amazing opportunity. Like, I hadn't even finished my MFA yet. I had one more semester left, and they were like, yeah, we'll work with you. Like, you seem like you're really put together, and you're nimble enough that you can, like, make this work. And that really sort of set my career in teaching. And, but I'm glad that I allowed myself to take that risk and to just say, Juana, like, you know what? Like, I don't know what it is that makes you doubt yourself, but just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. We have about a week left of your show at Hecho en Mano. It's our second exhibition. And I wanted to just chat a little bit about the work that's up there. This body of work, a lot of it was inspired by a return trip to Mexico a year and a half, after being away for 20 plus years. Do you want to talk about just kind of maybe some of the pieces in the show, or just, however you want to approach it, where this body of work was inspired?
Yeah. So, well, first and foremost, thank you both for just giving me the space to be able to share this second solo exhibition. I feel like I've grown up with the gallery. When I went back to the opening of the solo show these past 2 weeks ago, I was actually in the gallery kitchen, and I saw this picture of my last opening, and I don't know, it's a really, the gallery and the people who run the space, you guys are like part of my art family, and so thank you for just allowing me to share this really personal sort of body of work that I think was sort of a culmination. It was going to happen eventually. I just didn't know when. And of course, so the show is called Los Caminos de la Vida, Desde aquí, desde allá. And Los Caminos de la Vida, like the title of the show, is sort of inspired by this song that Omar Geles wrote in 1993. And it translates to like the ways of, or the paths of life. And this show is sort of an amalgamation of this experience that I had when I was able to go back to Zacatecas after 22 years, due to not because I didn't want to or didn't have necessarily the means. I just really couldn't because of this immigration status that I have. And Los Caminos de la Vida, like the song, I think what's really beautiful about it is that it's sort of, everybody has different interpretations of it, but it sort of speaks to like what it means, or like the realities of adulthood. I think that there's sort of these themes of like gratitude for parent sacrifices, and then also there's this level of acceptance of life's difficult journeys. And so I thought about like, how can I sort of talk about what it meant to be able to go back home after 22 years, to be able to reconnect with a place that I remember so vividly in childhood. And then at the same time, when I got there in real time, I was still able to have this very strange sort of experience of recognizing how vividly I remember certain spaces and not others. Mm-hmm. So the show is a collection of lithographs and ceramic pieces, and it sort of talks about these stories of individual people in my family, of these sort of these moments that I had in Mexico that were really impactful. And a lot of the show sort of creates emphasis on my family's like background in agriculture. specifically on my mom's side. It addresses questions about sort of what does it mean to sort of meet people that you like that you grew up talking on the phone, and then to like see them in person in the flesh in your homeland, and to see them as not just like a voice behind a phone, but this sort of fully realized person that, of course, like they're a real person, like that's who you're talking on the phone with, but the fact that these are people who I could have grown up with, people that I could have learned from, people that I could have sort of, like created shared experiences and stories along the way as I grew up. But I think that throughout the show, again, like you'll see references to like agriculture. Both sides of my families, they have like their own plot of lands. Some of them like own like they have like a dairy cow sort of business. We used to grow a lot of chilies, and so there's a lot of these sort of visual connections between sort of place and land, farming, and I sort of when I think a lot about like what would my life have been if I had stayed. Of course, maybe I wouldn't have I don't know if I think I still would have been an artist, right? I just don't know like what that would really what it would have really fully realized too. But these pieces are really just a way for me to maintain and sort of try to articulate ways to create like a family connection through borders. And a lot of these for me just hold a lot of, like really a lot of deep memories for me. And there's this saying that a lot of dreamers, sort of share. And it's called like ni de aquí ni de allá, neither from there or neither from here. And it's this like idea that dreamers and like I would say like the immigrant community as a whole, sort of whole highlight these feelings of like displacement, of not feeling like you are from here, or feeling like you're not from your home country or from your adopted country, right? And of course, like I'm living in the United States, and so there's this sense of like duality where how do you sort of embrace these cultural dualities through borders? How do you maintain these like family connections through the borders? And then how do you then allow yourself room to sort of create new understandings or new just sort of or sort of take all this amalgamation of duality and sort of create your own interpretation of what it means to be Mexicana growing up in the United States and like not being able to go back home to your home country, but then you had a very traditional Mexican upbringing. And so it's like I had all these questions. And so the show that I'm currently at Hecho really, sets the stage for also appreciating these people in my family that have continued to uphold our family like sort of traditions of tending to the land. I learned a lot about my family history through my elders, and a lot of them were very giving about the questions that I had, that there was no, like in education, you said there's no dumb question, but for them, I was like, I really just, I had so many questions about where our family came from, how long had we lived in that region, who I was digging deep. I was like what, like who founded this town, or how do you make that recipe? What are the how did you guys my aunt and your husband, like how did you guys meet? Like I was just so hungry to understand and create a connection with people that were just like, yeah, you are my sister's daughter and we love you and you're part of your family. We don't know you, but yeah, let's just spend this small amount of time and like make the most out of it. And of course, in the show, I sort of visually interpreted or represented specific people in my family, my tia Chole, my mom is in there, my niece is in there. I have ceramic pieces, which, I actually used to do a lot of ceramics in undergrad, but I never I wasn't really sure like how that sort of would manifest later on.
So I'm curious. You went alone on this trip, not with your sisters.
Yes.
Is there plans of going back with your sisters?
That is the dream.
Yeah.
That is the dream. But yeah. So when I went back on this trip, it was on my own, and the way that it sort of happened was quite organic, where I knew that this trip was going to happen during the summer, and then it just kind of slowly got pushed more and more and more, and I was just going to like fly from Providence and sort of be there as long as I could, and then I got wind that one of my aunts was visiting my mom in the summer in Denver, and I thought, wow, I was going to go visit my parents beforehand, so why, I guess I could go and see my aunt, and then maybe we can go back to Mexico together. And so that's kind of what happened. And, I kind of got to Denver and I thought, well, I don't want to cut my aunt's trip short because she usually stays there for about a month. And so maybe I can just like spend a month with my parents, which I haven't done in many years. And so I thought this could be great. But then when we eventually ended up going to Mexico, we actually ended up taking the bus back, which was a really interesting, the way that it sort of happened and the timing. Again, like I want to say that it was organic because we were kind of like, we should go this weekend. And my aunt was like, oh, I'm not ready to go home. Let's go next weekend. I thought, okay, sure. I'll just, hang out with my family a little bit longer. And when it eventually did happen, she was like, well, we're going on the bus because now, it's going to be really expensive. And that's just the way that we do it. And I said, okay, sure. And it was like a 33-hour bus ride, It was like crazy. Now, I mean, it's not that long, but I just thought, yeah, we'll like take some lunch, have enough food to like munch on throughout the trip. We'll sleep overnight, not a big deal. And what ended up sort of happening in this transit was that it created a space for storytelling and just like really answering questions. My aunt was so excited to say, you're going to meet this person. We're going to go and see this and that, and just tell me what you want to do and we'll make it happen. And, but what was so impactful about even just the bus trip in itself was that the day that we were set to leave, my dad said, hey, I don't, have a good time. I know that I meant a lot to them, that I was going to be able to go back home. And he's like, I just don't want to like freak you out or anything, but I just want you to know that the day that you're going to arrive to Zacatecas, that is the same day that we arrived in America.
Oh.
And I thought, it's like, no way. Like, is that really true? And he said, yeah, you're gonna get there, and that's when that's when you arrived in Colorado, and I'm never gonna forget. How are you ever gonna forget something like that? And so even from the nature of this visit, of this homecoming, it felt like that's how it was supposed to be. That's how it was supposed to unfold. And so because of the nature of how I got to Mexico and the stories that were shared, I just remember being in El Paso, and we were getting ready to just drive into Mexico. This moment that I've been yearning for or looking forward to for most of my teenage and young adulthood, sort of, it felt so strange. Just the bus just drove through, and once it crossed through the U.S. southern border, we didn't stop until the next morning in Honduras, or no, not Honduras, Durango, and then my aunt just kept saying, mija, we're in Mexico. And I thought, not until my feet touch the earth will I be in Mexico. And she said, okay, but we're in Mexico. And so when I got off that bus, in this like rural, station, I was like, holy crap, like this is true. And it was, during this whole time, it was like a pinch me moment. But so I think that it kind of like, so that sort of experience or that journey of getting there, of the timing was just like really impactful from the get-go. And then of course, like when I came back, it was was, the same thing. It was like 32, or I think it was like 35 hours, something crazy, because the bus driver, when we got back to Denver, like he got lost in Denver, and we were all just, anyways, it was a whole thing. But on the journey back, what was really remarkable was that so when you go, for the folks who don't know, when you take the bus to Mexico, you are given 100 pounds of luggage that is guaranteed with your ticket. And oftentimes, as long as you follow, of course, like the regulations of like the things that you can actually import from Mexico, like no seeds, specific foods, and things like that, like anything is game, right? And so when I came back, before I left, there was a lot of people who I had met around the town, who had spent time speaking to, people that my parents sort of grew up with, and now they're, in their 80s, in their 90s, all these elders. And they said, you know what, like, I still remember your parents, and I'm going to, give you all these gifts. And I thought, okay, great. Like, I mean, thank you for being so kind and just thinking about them. And of course, like, whatever you give me, I will bring them back. I'll give them back to my parents. And because of the nature of how I was, going back to the US in the bus, like, I could bring all this food with me. And I just thought, yeah, I'll just like bring a carry-on size of things. And then it just kind of turned into, literally, it was, I think it was like let's see, 100, I think it was like 150-pound bag of food, and this giant, like 45-pound, like morro and pestle, like and then, yeah, I think it was like 4 bags, a giant bucket of tunas. Like, it was this thing, like this pile grew and grew and grew. And I looked at it and I thought, this is just like a pile of love, a way to make connection. And how awesome is it to be the steward of, like, really just going in person and saying, hey, like, this person sent this to you, and they wanted me to tell you this. And that was such an amazing sort of moment for me, until like I got to El Paso again, and I didn't realize that I actually had to physically by myself carry all that across the border, and that was a whole other thing. But and so that experience, or that journey of the bus, sort of inspired one of the pieces in the gallery, like Ellos Pintaron la Raya, which is where like this image of the bus came back. Back in 2020, I created a print that I think a lot of people know me by. The Nopalazos en nombre de nuestras familias, which was, an image of a bus. And that piece, and specifically, was talking about like know your rights sort of information before, of course, like this crazy influx of organizations and people on the ground just sort of sharing this information right now in light of the new Trump administration and their sort of ICE tactics and the way that our streets are becoming very militarized. But this image of this bus sort of came back, but it sort of changed its form or its meaning for me. Mm-hmm. And of course, it represented a physical vessel or physical vehicle to like get from point A to point B. But for me, it sort of unfolded this space of wondering and questioning and sort of excitement. And at the same time, and so in that big image, ellos pintaron la raya, or they painted the line. Ellos, or they, can sort of signify, it's sort of like places the question of who is they. But in that image, you see like the bus, you see like La Chola, which is the red pickup truck that I grew up driving and working with my dad. You see the little Chihuahua with the little halo. That's Mia, our little family dog. It's all these stewards, all these things that sort of came with me on this trip. Even though, like, Mia crossed the Rainbow Bridge like about 3 or 4 years ago. La Chola, which again was the truck that I grew up landscaping with. I learned how to drive in with a trailer attached in the back, full of all these tools and things. And I actually ended up driving it in Mexico because my parents like sent it to Mexico. And so it was like these really impactful sort of duality moments of experiencing life on both sides of the border with these things. And then of course you see my mom playing tamborazo, which is like a very specific regional type of music and band from Zacatecas. So it's like all these connections between where I'm going, where I'm from, and how they're experienced on both sides of the border. And there's this moment in the corner of my niece, one of my nieces, and myself, like just drawing on the sand. And again, like, you guys asked earlier, like, when did your art career really happen? Well, if I didn't have drawing tools, like I remember in Mexico, I would just draw in the dirt. Like that is just something that it was just there and it was available. And so, and of course, I don't need the viewers to know that, but that's something that I hold on to myself, right, as a memory. And but there's this moment where we're sort of drawing this like what looks like an upside down kind of map, and it's this connection between this drawing called like America Invertida, or this idea that was sort of shaped or presented by Joaquin Torres Garcia, who's an artist from Uruguay, and he made this in 1943. And again, like a little connection maybe to like art history there, but it's this idea that like what happens if we reposition sort of the traditional frame of mind? Like what happens if we reposition like the South as the new North? So what happens in terms of even our own understanding of hierarchy and our roles in the world? Like what happens if we just flip that map and like put the Americas on the top? And I think a lot about that in terms of how that impacts our understanding of like socially and politically, like at least in the United States. And then also, in connection with my niece in there, I think a lot about like what happens if even I as an artist, like if I were to reinvent and reorient what it means to be an artist. What if the artist was on top and not the science underneath? Mm-hmm. And like we can have an argument about what is more valid in society, but she's an artist, and I love that that's something that she loves to do creatively. And she told me the other day, she's like, I don't want to be a teacher, I don't want to be an art teacher like you, but I want to be a printmaker. And I was like, amazing. And I'll talk to her mom and I'll say, how do you feel about that? I'm sorry. And it's just like, she's like, why are you sorry? Like, you're somebody that she aspires to be. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. So going back to like the Ellos Pintaron a Raya, or that lithograph that you see in the show, it's like these questions about, of course, like the sense of pride and anticipation of starting that journey, but then also like, who are the people that I'm taking with me, even though they're not physically there, they're still with me. And all these sort of, coded things that of course are unique to me, but hopefully when the people are in the gallery, they can also start to sort of make those visual connections.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I just, as you were talking, my mind flitted to Mercury, the messenger god, and I saw you as inhabiting that role, going back and forth between the different lands and carrying messages. And I loved how you said it was just a big basket of love. Is that what you said? Going back and forth, and even that role as an artist too is kind of like the role of Mercury as the messenger between two worlds. Yeah, and I mean, thank you for thank you for like articulating that way. I think for me, it was just it was really impactful to feel like a steward to not only like physical objects, but to find a way to like bridge questions for both the people that are living in Mexico and the US. And what I found was one of the most impactful things too is that, of course, like physically being there on the ground was something that I needed for my soul as a person. It is something that I really desired for a long time. But to be able to share with my family and say, hey, like this thing that, do you remember like that piece of furniture? Like it's still there. Like look at the pictures, like look at these things, like to be able to just even have that time to share stories, which is something that my family, was something that we do all the time. That's how we pass on, history and knowledge. And I think that like being able to do that with my parents and say, yeah, mom and dad, like these people are still there. Like I took a picture of them and like, look, they allowed me to take pictures of them. Like, look at how they look now. And to be able to just have that time to just like talk about everything that happened, but also just to share knowledge in that way too was really awesome. And also, through this, as I was in some way sort of, sharing everything that I experienced, my parents also were like, oh, see, now that you've seen this and now that you understand this, let me tell you more about this person or these story or these places that I've never told you before. Because
without any context, you would not understand. And so I was able to, again, continue to learn and expand on my own family history, even when I came back. So that was like something that, that was really, really amazing. But I do hope that I'm able to, go back again and to continue learning.
Yeah. Well, anything else?
Do we want to ask one of the...
If you want to.
The questions? Okay, we have this list of, what do we call them? Softball questions. Juana, what do you do when you get stuck? Could be artistically, it could be anything, really, in life.
When I get stuck, I try to find do things that bring me joy. Whether that is listening to a song that I've loved since I was 15 years old, whether even if it's terrible, or if it's picking up a book that I really loved growing up. I love the the Percy Jackson series, who are now a Disney series now. I remember being really fascinated by that. Harry Potter series, Naruto, all these things, but I try to find things that really bring me joy and transport me to a time where I was really calm and really, and just really, I was really happy.
Love that.
And and also sometimes I try to think about other ways that I could not start something new for the sake of the art practice, but could I do something in my routine that I'm missing? Could I go out on more walks? Could I rest more? Could I do something that is just for me mentally, physically, and emotionally?
Love that. I want to share every morning I do a little have a whole ritual that I do, and part of the ritual involves reading a quote of the day on this app, Insight Timer. And the quote for today that showed up was, "Find a place inside where there's joy, and the joy will burn out the pain." And that was Joseph Campbell.
Nice.
That feels appropriate to what you just shared.
Nice.
Yeah. I love that. What is the app called?
It's called Insight Timer. We're not getting any money for saying it over and over again.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Juana, for sharing your story, sharing your art, and I feel so grateful to be able to have the space to share it with Santa Fe. And it'll be up for another week. I'm going to try to get this episode out tomorrow morning. And then I think we'll see you in Brooklyn.
I think so. Yeah. So are y'all coming in on a Thursday, Friday? Yeah, because it starts on Friday, right?
The show. There's the quote unquote VIP opening on Thursday night, and and we're actually going to come a few days early. Our anniversary's on April 1st, so we're going to come and hang out for a few days before the fair.
Good.
Yeah. So we'll have your work up at the fair, and I think that's all from this side.
Yeah, thank you, Juana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both.